Batman Arkham Knight was probably the most anticipated video game in my entire life, and I doubt any will reach that same level of hype ever again. Coming off of Arkham City, the greatest superhero game of all time in my opinion, I couldn't have been more stoked for its follow-up, Rocksteady's follow-up, Batman Arkham Knight. I already explained in my review of Harley Quinn's Revenge that the absence of Paul Dini in the writer's chair with this one was a bit of a red flag with me. I knew it wouldn't be as good as the previous two installments from a writing standpoint, or at least had very little faith in it in that regard. The Joker was dead, Batman's greatest adversary, and the void would be damn near impossible to fill, regardless of whatever villains you decided to throw into it. Being that Arkham Knight was going to be on the next generation of consoles, and upped the ante in terms of content, gameplay features, and overall eye candy, I also felt that this was a sign of caution, a form of distraction to pad out its other weaknesses. Now I want to make it perfectly clear, see this as a disclaimer of sorts. I love Arkham Knight, it's my second favorite game in the series. While I don't necessarily admire every choice made in it, every aspect from top to bottom, I do still think it's a great game, and easily towers head and shoulders above countless other superhero titles in the medium. I have my issues with it, which I will get to of course, but I do believe a lot of people bash this game unfairly for a multitude of reasons. Again, I will get to them. I believe there is a misunderstanding with Arkham Knight and what it was trying to accomplish. Did it stick its landing in each and every instance? No. Was it disappointing at times? Yes and maybe, depending on who you ask. But it still deserves praise from not only comic book fans and Batman fans, but the gaming community in general. It's still one of the most impressive titles of the 8th generation, at least in my opinion, and if there's one thing it does and does well, it makes you feel like Batman. You become the Batman. Arkham Knight follows Batman as he takes on the Scarecrow, returning after his apparent death at the hands of Killer Croc in Arkham Asylum, though Arkham City features an Easter egg that reveals he had survived and has been planning a new horrifying scheme in the years since. On Halloween, Scarecrow threatens to unleash his new fear toxin across Gotham, which causes a citywide evacuation. Batman tracks him to Ace Chemicals, where he has been holed up manufacturing his scary Kool-Aid, and later learns of a device known as the Cloudburst, which Scarecrow plans on using to disperse his toxin. Scarecrow unites all the remaining villains in Gotham and partners with a new figure known as the Arkham Knight, who leads an army of militia forces and drone tanks to finally kill Batman once and for all. The Arkham Knight's forces pressure the Caped Crusader into bringing in his big guns, the Batmobile, which is drivable for the first time in the series after years of fans requesting it. With the help of his Bat Tank, he faces off against the combined might of Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight in the hopes of saving the city. First and foremost, let's talk about Scarecrow. Many of you know by now that Mysterio from Spider-Man is my favorite villain in all of comics, but the Scarecrow has always been a close second, and as a die-hard Scarecrow fan, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this is my favorite version of him in all of media. From a design standpoint, a performance standpoint, he's simply unforgettable. John Noble, of Fringe and Lord of the Rings fame, voices Scarecrow in this game, and he is outstanding in the role. His voice is soft, soothing, yet at the same time creepy and unsettling. He gets under your skin and gives you goosebumps whenever he is on screen.
Your fears got the better of you, I see. How fitting that I will win, and Batman's life will be over. Not because of what I have done to your precious city, but because you are scared of what I will do to your friends, your family. They are your weakness, hiding just below the surface. I'm sure that you're scared of what will happen when I tear that mask from your face. What will we find? Your true identity, or proof that without your mask, you are nothing, impotent, powerless, afraid.
I might have some issues with Arkham Knight as a game, but if there is one thing Rocksteady nailed with it, it's the Scarecrow. He is a film-quality villain in terms of on-screen presence, and easily the biggest threat Batman has faced in the Arkham franchise up until this point. His plan affects the entire city of Gotham, which other ones in the past did too, but here, you feel the immense scale of it in ways the other villains just didn't reach. The Scarecrow in Arkham Knight is one of the most competently written villains I've seen in the superhero genre. If you really think about it, he never makes any dumb or questionable decisions. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. Simple as that. Scarecrow actually succeeds with his plan and covers the city with his fear toxin that you as Batman must traverse through, despite the extreme psychological danger it presents. With the help of Poison Ivy, who sacrifices herself, you manage to clean up the gas, but that initial detonation of the cloudburst, it was something I didn't see coming. Scarecrow has some serious balls. In many ways, Crane accomplishes what he set out to do, to destroy the Batman by unmasking him on live television. He even manages to attack several of Batman's allies throughout the game too, like Barbara Gordon and Robin. Again, Scarecrow is very well written here, a competent villain, and a legitimate threat to the hero. The only other antagonist in the series that comes close, in my opinion, is Bane from Batman Arkham Origins. Seeing as he found out Batman's true identity, breaks into the Batcave and nearly kills Alfred. But even he falls short, due to his usage of TN1 for no logical reason, and the idiotic writing that had it destroy his brain's memory centers, so everything could fall into place with the events of Arkham Asylum and City. The character had the legs cut out from under it in many ways. Anywho, the design of Scarecrow in Arkham Knight is one of the character's biggest strengths because it has a purpose, an explanation. They didn't make him look scarier just for the hell of it. After Killer Croc grabbed him and took him under the water during the events of Arkham Asylum, you presumed he was dead. Jonathan Crane's body was broken and destroyed. He would have had to repair it. The string holding his jaw together, the knee brace on one side, his clouded eyes similar to cataracts, he was essentially a walking corpse. The Scarecrow's design in Arkham Knight makes his one in Arkham Asylum look like a cute teddy bear by comparison. The extreme alteration to his design also reminds me of the one the character went through in Batman the Animated Series, starting off very cliché and then becoming darker and darker as the series progressed.
You don't scare me.
Shh. It's okay to be afraid.
On top of the main story where you take on the Scarecrow in Arkham Knight, there are countless side missions you can do at any given time, and with the added-in ones from the Season of Infamy DLC, this game is padded out quite nicely at this point. Notable ones I really enjoy include City on Fire, which have you chase down Firefly, who's trying to burn down all of Gotham's fire stations. Wonderland, which has you rescue several GCPD officers kidnapped by the Mad Hatter, with the final battle taking place within the pages of a storybook, summarizing the events of the series, minus Arkham Origins of course. Creature of the Night features Man-Bat, and no matter how many times I play this game, he still scares the shit out of me. You've got In From the Cold with Mr. Freeze, which ends in an emotionally satisfying way. It's quite beautiful really, kudos to the writers. Beneath the Surface with a downright terrifying version of Killer Croc, further mutated due to the extreme physical trauma administered to him, and Lamb to the Slaughter with the ever-delusional Deacon Blackfire. My personal favorite is The Perfect Crime, which has Batman investigate a series of bodies he finds all across Gotham, with cryptic words written near them, opera music playing, and unique physical imperfections that you must find to identify them. You come to learn that the man responsible for killing them is Laszlo Valentin, Professor Pig. He's a very new character compared to many other Batman rogues, only debuting in comics in 2007, which is why prior to playing this game, I didn't even know he existed, and why would I? Most of the Batman stuff I look at is older than that. Though the vast majority of the side missions featured in Arkham Knight are enjoyable and do their respective villains justice, some of them do not. Two-Faced Bandit with Two-Face is not much better than the Catwoman Predator sequence at the end of Arkham City. Following City, I was really hoping Two-Face would be the one to fill the void left by the Joker because in many ways, he's the second best Batman villain. but sadly, what we got here is another Predator encounter, and you just wipe the floor with one of Batman's greatest adversaries. Sometimes I freeze him in place. He lasts longer that way. Another one is Friend in Need, where an imposter Bruce Wayne takes Lucius Fox hostage at Wayne Tower, and Batman must go and rescue him. This imposter is of course Thomas Elliot Hush, in what I found to be a disappointing conclusion to an arc that was set up in Arkham City. Mind you, it's not terrible by any means, just a little unsatisfactory, all things considered. The Riddler makes an appearance in this game yet again, and I don't really know what else to say about him. His riddles can be fun in spurts, and finding the Easter eggs are cool, not to mention there were much less in this game than Arkham City, which was appreciated, but I think by this point in the series, he kind of overstayed his welcome with me. I think if they ever make another Arkham game, try to just incorporate the Riddler and his death traps into the story in some way. Have him be a recurring villain that keeps popping up over and over again, getting in your way. I'm kind of sick of his Riddler trophies. They can still be fun, and I enjoyed searching for them in this game, but it's starting to get a little stale. I don't know how much patience I'll have with it if they end up making another game. Hell, even continue making them past that. Not to mention, Nigma seemed even crazier in this game, which was probably the point, but the fact that he managed to build all these racetracks for you to do with the Batmobile, not knowing Batman was even going to use it in the first place, seems a little too coincidental for its own good. His motivations feel a little moronic in this game, just saying. Another staple character of the Arkham franchise that makes his return in Arkham Knight is the Joker, once again played by Mark Hamill, despite his death at the end of Arkham City, and the fact that you play as a police officer at the beginning of this game that burns his body to a crisp. The Joker is able to return psychologically through Batman as the Dark Knight comes in contact with some of Scarecrow's fear gas early on in the game and begins to hallucinate his fallen foe. Not only is Batman grieving over his death in a way, he hasn't been able to truly get past it yet, but the remnants of Joker's blood within his body from the events of the previous game is slowly turning Batman into a Joker, due to its mutated properties from the Titan formula in Arkham Asylum. While Joker does manage to force himself into the game's narrative, it's at least interesting here, and he doesn't hijack any attention away from Scarecrow and Arkham Knight, unlike he did with Black Mask in Arkham Origins. I enjoy the Joker's role as this evil thought on Batman's shoulder, one he must constantly walk a fine line with, so as not to lose control. The Joker gives unique insight throughout key moments in the game, and you really get a sense of the internal struggle going on within Batman. I loved it. By the end, when Batman is exposed to even larger concentrated doses of Scarecrow's fear toxin, we get to play as the Joker himself within the confines of Batman's mind. At first, he seems to be in control, but as we play, we come to realize the deepest fears of the Joker. He's afraid to be forgotten, lost among the crowd. Eventually, he is overwhelmed by Batman, who locks him away for good, and finally accepts the death of his archenemy. He can finally put the Joker to rest. While I find all the psychological stuff between Batman and the Joker to be some of the strongest and most thought-provoking elements of this game that dives even further into their relationship than many other Batman stories explore, it brings along with it a lot of other baggage as well. Ideas that really expose the game's weaker aspects in terms of writing and its story as a whole. I mentioned that the traces of the mutated Joker blood within Batman from the events of Arkham City are slowly transforming him into a Joker. On top of that, you are introduced to several other people that were treated with Joker's blood when he shipped it to hospitals all across the city, something Joker mentioned in the previous game. Batman and the GCPD were unable to stop it all, and apparently these 4 souls were the only ones affected by it, all transforming into Jokers themselves, and Batman has been trying to find a cure. Batman is of course the 5th individual affected by Joker's blood, which he reveals later in the game, hence why all this stuff is happening in his mind. Again, I enjoy the psychological back and forth between Batman and the Joker in this game, but I feel this whole subplot with his blood physically transforming people into versions of himself to be a little too far-fetched, even for the world established in the Arkham series. It borders on supernatural, and they try to explain it medically, but it just doesn't work. I feel it was completely unnecessary and didn't even make sense when you take into account Batman administered a cure on himself at the end of Arkham City. He shouldn't be affected by Joker's blood, at this point, technically speaking. And the fact that he is, just makes all of this feel so forced and contrived, it isn't even funny. Also, only 4 people were affected by the blood? Are you serious? Joker said in Arkham City he had been shipping his blood for weeks prior to the events of the game. I doubt only 4 were given it, spanning every hospital in Gotham. I call bullshit. I give credit to Rocksteady for trying something new that hadn't been attempted before in a Batman-Joker story like this, but even still, it's just way too bizarre for its own good. There were brief moments of glory, but it has more to do with the characters themselves and the performances of their voice actors, not because of this strange Joker transformation subplot. The psychological battle between Batman and the Joker didn't need all of this in order to happen. Batman was in many ways distraught and lacking focus after the Joker's death. He was affected by Scarecrow's fear gas. That's all he really needed. He had to find it in himself to get over the death of the Joker and bury him for good. Making it so that Batman and these other 4 people are transforming into Joker seemed way too weird and leads to many cringeworthy moments and lines of dialogue. I hate to say it, but it's by far the most glaring and weakest element of the entire game in my opinion. I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote it. Alright, let's finally get to it. The Arkham Knight, the title character of Batman Arkham Knight, who serves as the game's secondary antagonist. On paper, I really do enjoy this idea, a militarized anti-Batman that doesn't hesitate when it comes to using guns, armed militia, and even drone tanks to get the job done. Mind you, the fact that he uses tanks that don't have anyone inside of them makes Arkham Knight appear quite incompetent, the complete opposite of his partner Scarecrow. If he really wanted to strike hard at Batman like he says he wants to, you'd think he'd force him to kill. But I digress. Arkham Knight's appearance is pretty badass, having a more tech-heavy design than that of Batman, especially with his mask. The Arkham Knight has a personal vendetta, as well as history with the Dark Knight, and will stop at nothing to kill him, even though the Scarecrow has to hold him back at several points throughout the story. Arkham Knight wants to be over and done with it, but Scarecrow wants to see Batman suffer first. I like the partnership between the Arkham Knight and Scarecrow. It's fun, but their motivations don't really mesh as strongly as they should, given a team-up of this scale. They both want to attack Batman, but in entirely different ways. Scarecrow needs the muscle the Arkham Knight provides, but if the Arkham Knight really wanted to kill Batman, he wouldn't need Scarecrow. He has an entire army, just go kill him. Simple. I find most of the hate for this game is targeted primarily at the Arkham Knight himself. Rocksteady promoted him as this completely new character, stressing that his identity was some big mystery. While that is technically correct on both fronts, he has never appeared before in the Arkham universe, and when you first pick up and play this game, you don't really know who he is. The vagueness of these statements are too easy for someone to misconstrue. Many of us believed he would be a well-known Batman villain from the comics or earlier games, donning the costume of his greatest adversary. Would it be Hugo Strange, somehow brought back to life? How about Hush, who had unfinished business with Bruce Wayne and Batman at the end of Arkham City? Nope. Arkham Knight turned out to be an already established character with a different coat of paint. I mentioned that when you first pick up and play this game, you don't know who the Arkham Knight is, and I mean that, at least for the first 20 minutes or so. Any hardcore Batman fan could easily guess his identity from a mile away. Hell, even someone somewhat familiar with the comics and mythology in general would know. The longer the Arkham Knight is on screen, and the more he talks, the quicker this long list of potential candidates shrinks to just one, and the game never tries to veer you away from it. Honestly, I would have admired Rocksteady's choice a little bit more if they had even taken the effort to provide us with a few red herrings within the narrative to distract you, confuse you, make you follow the wrong trail of breadcrumbs or something, but we got nothing. Any good mystery story, especially one featuring a secret identity like this, needs a few red herrings. That's what makes the final reveal so surprising. You didn't see it coming, because the story finds ways to trick your assumptions. Who Rocksteady chose isn't necessarily the reason all this didn't work, and why I think it was lazy. It's how they told the story and revealed him. There was no effort. They didn't follow the basic structure of an effective mystery character. The Arkham Knight was revealed in the end as Jason Todd, the second Robin who was captured, beaten, tortured, and seemingly killed by the Joker within the confines of Arkham Asylum. Batman was sent video evidence of his murder and believed him to be dead. However, Todd survived and blamed Batman for abandoning him. In his traumatized state, the Joker also got to him, and in an effort to kill his former mentor, Todd donned the guise of the Arkham Knight and would team up with the Scarecrow to take him down. Though this idea is really cool, and the Arkham Knight is his own character in a way, being the identity Jason Todd takes on after Robin, but before becoming Red Hood, his similarities to the latter are what upset a lot of fans. The Arkham Knight was the result of Todd being beaten and killed within Arkham Asylum, as opposed to the warehouse which turned him into the Red Hood in the comics, not to mention all the Lazarus Pit stuff. Here, Todd falls victim to Joker's torture and manipulation, being turned against Batman, twisted into some pet project of Joker's. As the Arkham Knight, Todd's motivations are slightly different as well, more naive and in their infancy compared to that of Red Hood. The Arkham Knight is willing to team up with Batman's villains, whereas with Red Hood, at least some incarnations of him, he wants to kill them as a way to succeed where Batman failed, wasting his time arresting them over and over again. Also, the Red Hood doesn't necessarily want to kill Batman per se, just send a message, do what he didn't have the balls to in his eyes. Currently, Red Hood has become more of an anti-heroic character as well, whereas Arkham Knight is a straight-up villain. It's not until the end of the game when Jason Todd turns good, or at least as good as you're gonna get at that point. Despite all this, again, the fact that Arkham Knight was essentially Red Hood with a new coat of paint was the problem. I think fans wanted a lot more from the reveal, myself included. The honest simple truth is, though, I don't believe choosing villains like Hugo Strange, Hush, or any other character fans had speculated would have worked either, because no matter who Rocksteady chose, someone out there would have hated it. We all had that one character we wanted it to be, and if it turned out to be another, naturally, you would have been left disappointed. It was inevitable. If anything, Rocksteady played it safe choosing Todd. At least that way they are drawing from something iconic and recognizable among fans and the mainstream alike. Was it the ideal choice? Maybe not, but the safest? I think so. And this leads me to the question, who should have been the Arkham Knight? Well, I'm not going to go through my entire list of potential candidates because they are all the same characters you would have chosen. Hugo Strange, Hush, maybe even Anarchy for that matter, because after all, he wanted to be like Batman, he just didn't agree with his methods. And if Rocksteady was going to incorporate references to Arkham Origins, including Anarchy, then why not? I think he would have been a good fit. But it's been years since this game came out, and in hindsight, I think they should have avoided using any notable villains or characters from the comics entirely. They should have picked someone from the Arkham universe itself. That way, the Arkham Knight would have been entirely original, and you wouldn't run the risk of disappointing fans, or having to alter already established motivations within iconic Batman villains. So, there is one person I think would have been a great choice for the Arkham Knight, and would have made for a surprising reveal. Hear me out here, you need to suspend your disbelief a little bit with this one, but what about Penelope Young from Arkham Asylum? She died in that explosion in the first game and her body is left there, showing her as deceased, but what if Batman was under the effects of Scarecrow's fear gas more than he thought? What if Penelope survived, and much like Jason Todd, was traumatized by the inmates at the asylum, such as Joker or Zaz? I mean, she was stalked and tormented by the Joker when he wanted her Titan formula. What if she just snapped? Much like Todd, what if she blamed Batman for abandoning her, believing she was dead? It's a stretch that she would get militarized training at that point and know Batman inside and out. Then again, the character didn't need to have that in the first place. But I think Penelope working with Scarecrow would make more sense than it did with Todd, and maybe after she found out it was Scarecrow's fear gas that caused Batman to abandon her in the first place, that's what causes her change of heart, maybe even teaming up with Batman to stop him in the end. Again, this is a stretch, and you would need to seal the gaps a bit more in terms of the narrative, but I think Penelope Young would have made for an interesting Arkham Knight at least. The voice modulator, armor giving her the appearance of a male, it would have made for a cool gender bend type character, in the same vein as the Phantasm or something. Having the Arkham Knight a female would have instantly made the final reveal more surprising because you wouldn't have seen it coming. It would have subverted your expectations because everyone would have assumed the Arkham Knight was a man. It would have been a way to fix the lack of red herrings too, and because her motivations would have been similar enough to Jason Todd and Red Hood, it would have shocked you as well when it turned out to be her instead. Keep in mind, Young was also a psychiatrist in the same way Jonathan Crane was, and having two of them targeting Batman's psyche like that would have worked wonders. I know all this is a stretch, and in some areas, it's a bit messy, but I find it a lot more interesting and unique than just picking Jason Todd as the Arkham Knight. If you have someone better from the Arkham universe that isn't from the comics, I'm all ears. But unfortunately, this concept of mine is dead, lying on the floor in the Arkham Mansion. Let's finally get to Gotham itself. The game world here is the biggest the franchise has had thus far, and is filled to the brim with Easter eggs, much like the previous games were, and even references to other characters within the larger DC universe, like Lex Luthor, Green Arrow, and The Flash, among others. Arkham Knight's Gotham is massive, vibrant, and downright beautiful. Traversing it with the gliding system here is the most satisfying it has ever been in this series, and when you have the grapnel boost fully upgraded, the distance you cover with each one is just unbelievable. You soar through the sky with crazy speeds, and the rain effects and lighting of the city just add to the game's overall atmosphere and feel. Some people have been critical of the fact that the majority of this game's story takes place outside and not within indoor environments, but with a game world this big and a traversal system this huge, you kind of need to be. Arkham Asylum worked because it was confined and claustrophobic, but a story like Arkham Knight's wouldn't be effective being told in that way. Yeah, the Arkham games seem to be using less and less indoor environments as they've went on, but it makes sense. There are still many indoor sections, just not as much, but it's not something that really bothers me. Another thing I find people complain about is the fact that Gotham is empty yet again, without any civilians. Arkham City featured a walled-off portion of old Gotham turned into a mega-prison, so it made sense that there would be no citizens in it. In Arkham Knight, the threat of Scarecrow's bomb causes a citywide evacuation, which again makes sense. I don't know why so many people nitpick about this. It's a much greater explanation than what we got in Arkham Origins. A terrible snowstorm? Really? Wow, it's really coming down, guys. Having civilians in these games would be far too much work to animate, and variables that would affect the story in far too many ways. Honestly, they would just get in the way of everything. Eliminate them. It's much easier that way. Gliding isn't your only means of transportation across Gotham because, like I had mentioned earlier in the video, the Batmobile makes its debut in the game for the first time in the series. If you've seen my previous reviews of the Arkham titles, then you would know the Batmobile wasn't something I really wanted or felt was needed in these games. Sure, I always thought about driving it back in the days of Arkham Asylum, but that was mainly just fantasy. I knew by incorporating a ground vehicle into games like this that focused more on combat and gliding in the air, you were going to be faced with problems regardless of how well you did it. The Batmobile would come down to simply being eye candy and fan service, not much more than that. And that's exactly what it ended up being. You can drive the Batmobile if you want, but it's so much faster gliding in the air, especially when you fully upgrade the grapnel boost. So what's the point of using it in the first place? Mind you, I'm not someone who hates on the Batmobile in this game. I enjoyed it. After 2 games of using a gliding system, and one basically involving you just running from point A to point B, it provides some much needed variety to Arkham Knight's gaming experience. Even when you switch it to its battle mode, the way you fight Arkham Knight's drones, I think it works well enough and once again provides some fun variety on top of everything else this game, and series as a whole, offers. A lot of people complained that they rammed the Batmobile down your throat, forcing you to use it to solve various puzzles throughout the game, fight drone tanks, or even have you scan the environment to follow breadcrumbs. But again, what did you expect? They needed to have it serve some sort of purpose within the game's narrative because you can glide much faster without it. The rationality of using it as a form of transportation is essentially non-existent. And if the Batmobile would have somehow been integrated into Arkham City or Arkham Origins, the same thing would have happened. It would have sat there collecting dust, because no one would have really used it. These games don't ooze Batmobile driving, they're about stealth, combat, detective work. If you expected the Batmobile to be anything other than just fan service and eye candy alone, without them having to force it down your throat at times, then you were greatly mistaken. Again, I enjoy the Batmobile in this game. In fact, I have a soft spot for it. But I see it for what it is, an option if I get tired of gliding and want more variety. A way to feel like Batman and get to drive the Batmobile, live my childhood fantasy. But for those of you that complain that they forced you to use it too much, you asked for it. Like I said, I didn't need the Batmobile in these games. They didn't need it to be successful telling their stories. When fans demand stuff like this, fan service is really all you're gonna get in return. Stop complaining and enjoy your Batmobile. It ruined the game in some ways, I'll get to that in a second, which doesn't really have anything to do with the car itself, but still. With a game series focusing on stealth and combat, it shouldn't be surprising that a driving element would complicate things. You knew it would happen. Batman Arkham Knight is the best game in the series in terms of its gameplay. The combat controls are slick and smooth, completely responsive. Batman's arsenal of moves have been expanded upon even further to include more epic and satisfying counter and strike animations. There are more quick-fire gadgets to use, and takedown combinations for Predator sequences. The upgrade trees in the menu are easy to navigate, and just look at how many things you can do in this game. Just about anything you can think of. Anything Batman would do, you can do. I don't think it's necessary that I go through each and every one in this video. Just play it and find out for yourself. I will say that I loved a lot of the new enemy types though, most notably the medic, which can not only heal fallen allies, but protect them with electrical barriers that force you to change up your strategy in combat scenarios. In terms of the Predator encounters, something that I didn't mention in my review of Arkham City is that I love that they forced you to turn off detective mode at times and not use it as a crutch like you did in the first game, exploiting it way too much and going overboard. Here, much like in Arkham City, you have enemies that have hacked Batman's detective vision, making it useless, and even new ones that can use it as a tracker to find you if you keep it on for too long. These additions were great. The new hacking device was cool too, allowing you to take over drones and electrocute nearby enemies. Though Arkham Knight provides you with many more gameplay challenges, I still feel it's the easiest game in the franchise, even on the hardest difficulties. The vast array of moves and gadgets at your disposal make you feel very overpowered. The enemies in this game don't stand a chance. Arkham Knight introduces new fear takedowns, which are fucking badass as hell and make you feel like Batman, picking off guys one by one, but unfortunately, they are the most broken gameplay element in this game in my opinion, and yes, even on the hardest difficulty. When you have it fully upgraded, you can chain 5 of them together, and all you have to do to charge it back up again is perform a single silent takedown. That's it. They make Predator encounters a breeze and remind me of the remote claw and shock gloves from Arkham Origins. Mind you, they aren't that broken. Even the Batmobile sequences when you take out those big tanks aren't really that hard when you know what upgrades to get. The most useful is the one that allows you to lure the big bastards out with your 60mm cannon. All you have to do at that point is sneak up behind them and wham! Rinse and repeat. Like I said, Arkham Knight is a little too easy in my opinion. Even with all the added challenge, they just made Batman too damn powerful in the end. If one strategy doesn't work, you have like 10 others and all of them are relatively simple to pull off. You're literally a one-man army in this game. Nothing can stand in your way. Though Batman Arkham Knight is head and shoulders above every other title in the franchise in terms of gameplay, one thing it didn't manage to impress a lot of fans with were its boss battles. For a series that features some pretty epic hero-villain confrontations, especially the one in the previous game with Mr. Freeze, I myself couldn't have been more excited with what we were in store for here in Arkham Knight, being that this was on the next generation of consoles. There was no way we would be left disappointed, right? Well, unfortunately we were. Most of them involved the usage of the Batmobile, which further annoyed anyone who was already on thin ice with it, given its forced nature within the rest of the game. Even the battles that didn't involve the vehicle in any way were far from spectacular. Mind you, some of them I did enjoy, like the one with the Cloudburst tank and the Arkham Knight's drill, as they both served a purpose within the narrative. Even the Arkham Knight's helicopter, which was a great way to get you familiar with the Batmobile's combat controls at the beginning. With all that said, there just needed to be more variety. The main villains in this game aren't given grand head-to-head battles with Batman, which is a real shame. The Joker's fear-induced takeover of Batman's mind at the end of the game features a boss battle of sorts, but it's more or less a combat challenge with endless enemies, and you only play it until a cutscene takes over. With Arkham Knight, it's essentially a Predator room that has you sneak to a specific vantage point, that's it. In Arkham Knight's instance, it should have definitely been a more physical confrontation akin to that of Deathstroke in Arkham Origins. I think his character was given the shortest end of the stick when you take into account all the villains in this game. They built him up as such a threat, but in the end, he really wasn't. And speaking of Deathstroke, he's in this game as well, as the individual who takes over Arkham Knight's militia after you have beaten the main game and completed all militia-related side missions. His boss battle is almost identical to the Cloudburst one, just that his tank is surrounded by even more drones you have to defeat first. And yes, you battle Deathstroke in a tank, not with hand-to-hand combat. A lot of people were upset with this, but honestly, he felt tacked onto the game following the release of Arkham Origins. He was probably added in late in development, so I don't know why anyone would have expected much out of him. If I were to pick the best boss battle in the game, it'd have to be the Riddler, and that's not saying much at all, seeing as he is mainly just side mission filler in the grand scheme of things and not part of the main narrative. Like I said, I do enjoy the Batmobile battles with the Arkham Knight's drill, and even the Cloudburst tank, but the game needed more variety, and having an actual physical battle between Batman and Arkham Knight would have made the most sense. Even a psychological one with Scarecrow, in the same vein as his encounters from Arkham Asylum, would have worked too. All in all, the boss battles in Arkham Knight were extremely disappointing and non-existent. The Season of Infamy DLC did remedy this a bit with Killer Croc, for example, but even still, he's not part of the main game, so I won't really count it. Now I do want to point out again that Batman is severely overpowered in this game compared to all other previous installments. Does that mean you should go easy on the boss battles in Arkham Knight? No, not really. They were still very disappointing. But realize if this Batman found himself in any of the amazing boss battles in previous games, he would wipe the floor with them, and they would pose no challenge. I think in some ways, Rocksteady backed themselves into a corner, giving this Batman so many gadgets, combat moves, and new takedowns at his disposal that it became almost impossible to make any compelling boss battles that would have put all these skills to the test, especially in later parts of the game. Mind you, comparing Arkham Knight with its previous installments in that regard isn't really fair, and I say it would have been nearly impossible, but I'm not a game designer, I have no idea. If Rocksteady added all these new stuff into the game, they should have been able to counter it in some way. Isn't that how making a video game like this works? If they weren't able to, then maybe some of these overpowered elements needed to be scrapped in favor of the story, in favor of the boss battles, in favor of the player's overall experience. I don't know. So let's finally end this review. Batman Arkham Knight is by far the best looking game in the entire franchise. In terms of its gameplay, it also stretches high above everything that had come before, and for the first time in the series, truly makes you feel like Batman inside and out, with almost every aspect of the game fueling this notion and making it a reality. With that said, though Arkham Knight reaches the highest of highs the Arkham franchise has to offer, it also manages to sink to its lowest of lows as well. It can be a bit of a mixed bag at times. I think when Arkham Knight is bad, it's really bad, and these moments are some of the most revealing in all the Arkham titles. Having said that, none of the issues I mentioned in this video break the game in any way. It's playable, enjoyable, and a great Batman story featuring one of my favorite Batman villains. Did it take a few risks that didn't pay off? Yes. Was it disappointing in some regard? Absolutely. But is it a terrible game? Fuck no. Arkham Knight might not be the best superhero game out there. It might not even be the best Batman game, depending on who you ask. But it still far surpasses the majority of superhero games on the market. You can't be too picky with it. At least it was made with some level of competence that can't always be said in the genre. I want to end this video by simply asking, where have the Batman Arkham games gone? There are so many stories that could be told with these characters, especially if they went back to the earlier days of Batman's crime-fighting career. I have heard rumors, but until verified, they are just that. Rumors, speculation, conspiracies, what have you. Until we get some sort of legit statement declaring another Batman Arkham game is in development, then I believe this series is dead as of right now. I want to be wrong, trust me I do, but as the days have turned to months and the months into years, I have less and less faith as time goes on. Hopefully they continue this Batman Arkham series, and if not, create some new franchise borrowing elements from it, who knows. Despite losing the battle in terms of live-action films in recent years, DC has dominated the market in terms of animation and video games for far too long. I'd hate to see them just stop and allow Marvel to rise from the ashes and dominate yet another form of mainstream media. Marvel is making an impact with games like Spider-Man on PS4 and the upcoming Avengers game, and if they keep it going, they will be the new talk of the town. DC needs to return in a big way very soon, because day after day, outside of the comic books and animated films, they keep letting many of us down in terms of movies and video games, Injustice and the like being the only real exceptions. The world needs more Batman, it needs more Arkham. Here's to hoping the franchise isn't really gone, at least not yet.